Bonjour mes amis, je m'appelle Tito, je fais des vidéos sur les finances personnelles sur mon autre chaîne, mais sur cette chaîne, je parle d'autres choses comme aujourd'hui où je vais revoir le series Postcards. When four Nigerians find themselves in India at the same time, their individual circumstances teach them the importance of love, sacrifice, and family, even when you're thousands of miles away from home. Now, this series, Postcards, is directed by Hamisha Daryani Ahuja, who, according to her Wikipedia page, is Nigerian, but she's born of Indian parents, but she grew up here in Lagos, Nigeria, and she's also the person who directed Namaste Wahala, a film that I never got to see because the reviews of that film were just they were quite discouraging, so I never got to see Namaste Wahala. And because I didn't want that to happen with Postcards, I rushed to see Postcards the day after it came out on Netflix, and I'm glad that I did. All that said, with all that context in place, let's dive into it, beginning with Les Performances. By the way, guys, this review will contain spoilers because Postcards is currently on Netflix, so if you don't want to hear any spoilers, please go and see Postcards first, and then come back for this review. Sola Sobowale as Alaja Bumi. I think this character was a mix of some of our favorite Sola Sobowale characters. You know, you had the socialite, you had the mother who is very caring of her, well, son in this case. She just has one child in this series, and it was good. I wouldn't say her performance in this was a top 5 Sola Sobowale performance for me, but she was consistent through all 6 episodes, from being this woman who really enjoys to party as a Lagos socialite, to being this woman who has this health scare and needs to be flown to India for an operation. Although a doctor friend of mine, when she was watching it, she goes, fibroids is not the kind of thing that you really need to be flown to India for. You got to do what you got to do to make the movie, right? So she's flown to India, and then in the third and final act of the series, she reconnects with her brother and her son, and there's this whole family bonding thing going on there. And like I said, Sola Sobowale is consistent all through with each phase of the character in the series. Plus, I feel she was the central character in the series because if you noticed, all the Nigerian characters in the film were connected to her. And it's at the end of the series that kind of like dawned on me, especially when it's in episode 6 that we see that she knew Rahama Sadau's character a few years prior. Now, moving on to Tobi Bakre, who plays her son Yemi. It was refreshing to see a different side to Tobi Bakre, or a different performance, because I've been seeing so much of the tough guy Tobi Bakre in other things in recent times, from Brotherhood to Gangs of Lagos, and it was nice to see him in a bit of a comedic role for a change. He was really good. You could tell that Tobi really put his heart and soul into it, as he often does with most of his roles, to be honest. The dancing was interesting. You know, he plays this young man who doesn't want to go to school and necessarily further his academics. He wants to pursue his career or his passion as a dancer or a performer, but he doesn't tell his mother that, so he's dodging her calls. He does a really good job, you know. His character in this reminded me of his character in Sugar Rush just a bit. RMD, Richard Mofe Damijo, he plays Olumide. He's grumpy old man, I can say that much. And I have to say, this was one of my favorite RMD performances in recent times, I have to admit. And the funny thing is that it's not necessarily a new type of character that RMD is playing. RMD has played a grumpy old man several times, most recently in The Black Book, although that was a mix of grumpy old man plus John Wick. But in this one, without the action stuff in it, I think I really appreciated it. And I think what did it for me with this performance was that he was in a different country, and it was just a different environment, and I think that brought out something different from RMD performance-wise. Even his friendship with the character played by the late Rio Kapadia, who was the Indian man who was his best friend. Unfortunately, he passed away. But yeah, his interaction with him, I felt like that was a bit new or different. And also like the environment too. I think it just brought out something different from RMD, and I liked the grumpy old man variant of RMD's, or his performance rather, in this series. Moving on to Rahama Sadau, my best Rahama Sadau performance thus far. After Wrath and Revenge, which was on Netflix, but which I did not review, and I regret that I didn't review Wrath and Revenge last year. But coming back to this, she was really good, and why this was my favorite Rahama Sadau performance was because she didn't play a stereotypical northern woman, as she often does. They tend to cast her in that role because she just fits the mold and she does it so well. So it's understandable that they make her play either like a rich or a poor northern woman in most of the series or the movies that we see her in. But in this film, because it's set in India and she's an expat there married to a doctor, she didn't need to do the whole northern woman thing, and I found it to be very refreshing. And extra points to her for speaking Hindu in the series. I was very impressed, and it was just really refreshing to see Rahama Sadau doing something different. Moving swiftly on, her bestie in the series, played by the lovely Nancy Isime, who, if I'm being honest, was like 70 to 80% the reason why I wanted to watch Postcards. I'm a fan of Nancy Isime's. I saw on her Insta stories a year or two ago, probably 2 years ago, when they were filming this in India, and it registered in my mind that Nancy Isime has a project that she's done in India. I will look forward to seeing it when it comes out. So when this came out and I saw her picture, on the poster, I was like, oh yes, this is the project. I'm going to see it. Like I said, largely because of Nancy. Imagine my surprise when Nancy doesn't show up on this series, this 6-episode series, up until like episode 3. And I stuck through episode 1 and 2 just because I wanted to see Nancy. And when she shows up on the series, I was like, okay, let me see what her character or her role is like and how things pan out, for her on this series. So long story short, I'm just saying that Nancy Isime really is the reason why I watched this series largely. But anyway, her character is Isioma. Interesting girl, very small role, right? And if somebody on Instagram said, so Nancy Isime went all the way to India to do Waka Pass. Waka Pass essentially means like a very small, seemingly insignificant role. I don't agree. It wasn't a Waka Pass role. It was a supporting role, but it was impactful. But I will say it was the smallest role I've ever seen Nancy Isime in recent years. Well, since Nancy Isime got on my radar years ago. But it was very strategic casting because, to be honest, if Nancy Isime was not in this series, I would have been far less inclined to watch it. I can say that confidently. And I don't blame her for taking a seemingly small role. And people, even Tobi Bakre, people are saying this about Tobi Bakre, that why would he go all the way to India to do this kind of seemingly like demeaning role? Look, it was probably good money for each of them. It was good exposure. It was a nice and it was a good project. So I don't blame. And I mean, with actors, work is work. It's not a matter of being in the best movie or the best series. Sometimes it's just work, and you have to see it that way, as something that will pay the bills, and you put your best foot forward, regardless of whether it's a big role or a small role. Now, moving on to the gentleman who played Rahama Sadau's character's husband, Rajnish Dugal, and he plays Dr. Kapoor. And he was really good. Well, him and Rahama Sadau were convincing as a couple on this series. A couple who, interestingly enough, when they got married, apparently did not want to have children, but somewhere along the line, he changes his mind, and she is sticking to her guns, and that causes the conflict between two of them throughout the series. This same doctor friend of mine who hinted at why Sola Sobowale's character was going all the way to India for... Sorry, I'm putting you on blast. I won't say your name though. For the fibroids operation, she also said that, man, this doctor character he's quite handsome. The guy playing Rahama Sadau's husband. I was like, yes, he is. I mean, they have to please you female viewers, don't they? But he did really well. And like I said, the chemistry between himself and Rahama Sadau as a married couple was actually there, and it was quite it was believable. Ce que j'ai aimé. The production design on this project was very good. I really enjoyed the visuals, and to be honest, it's the visuals that kept me engaged in episode 1 and 2 when I wasn't really understanding where this series was going. It was up until like the middle towards the end of episode 3 that I knew or got an idea of what was happening on this series. So the production design was really good, and I kept on appreciating it throughout the series. The wardrobe and the costuming on this project was also really good. I liked Tobi Bakre's very flamboyant and colorful outfits. They were very akin to somebody in that line of work, a performer or a dancer, right? The cinematography was really good as well. It was interesting to see, because I don't watch lots of Bollywood, but I'd imagine that when the production went to India, they used production people in India, and I could see the difference and I could appreciate the difference in the cinematography. And I really liked it. And in addition to that, the sets were really good, particularly RMD's character's home. You know, he plays this rich man, you know, Lumide, and you could feel the wealth from the house that he lived in, and even the apartment of the Kapoors, right? Little things here and there, in addition with the colors, that made the sets really pop and very attractive. I also liked the topic. Well, there are several topics, but I think one of the main topics in this series was the Kapoors. That's Rahama's character and Rajneesh's character. Them not wanting to have kids, them wanting to live a child-free life. That in itself is a very unique subject to treat in movies or series, right? Not to mention the scenario where one of those characters changes their mind. Because in the community, if I can call them that, of people who don't want to have kids, right? It's somewhat taboo, or it's a bit of an indictment or something like a contentious issue. Yes, that's it, a contentious issue. If a couple who got together deciding that they don't want to have kids, one of them changes their mind and decides that they do want to have kids. It's a very hot topic, right? And to see that being treated in this series felt a bit daring, and I found it to be very interesting and bold of the filmmaker, and I did appreciate it. This film also had lots of emotional, you know, stuff in it. I felt the emotional trigger being pulled towards the end, you know, when we see the families coming together for Olumide's 60th birthday party. So that was an emotional one, and then them reconnecting with Rahama Sadau's character Zainab. I was getting the emotions and the feels that they wanted me to feel. I feel like there's something that I'm missing that I really enjoyed in this series, but I'm forgetting. Oh yes, seeing our Nigerian actors in a different environment. And it's interesting when our Nollywood actors are being handled or directed by a non-Nigerian director. I'm so used to seeing our Nollywood actors working with Nollywood directors that it kind of feels like there's a predictability about it all, or about their performances. But seeing them in the hands of a director of Indian origin, even though, you know, technically she's also Nigerian, I felt like it brought something different to the table with these actors as a collective, but also individually. And I really appreciated that. I really liked it. Ce que je n'ai pas aimé. This series, Postcards, felt rather slow, particularly at the beginning, episode 1 and episode 2. It felt like such a slow burn. Now, the pacing wasn't too bad, right? It was semi-fast paced, but I think the issue was it took a while before we knew what was going on or what the point of this series was. For me, it wasn't up until like mid or ending of episode 3 before I understood who was who and what we were getting at on this series. And like I said earlier, it's really because of Nancy Isime that I stuck around till episode 3. If Nancy Isime wasn't in on this series, I would have abandoned ship at the end of episode 2. And I actually do know a couple of people. I know someone who abandoned ship after episode 1. I know another person who abandoned ship after episode 2. I know a third person who abandoned ship after episode 3. But to watch all 6 episodes of Postcards, there really has to be something about it that you like that will keep you coming back for the next episode. Luckily, the episodes aren't too long, and that's to its advantage. You know, I don't think there was any episode that was longer than 35 minutes. It took a bit too much time. It's a good series, but it just took a bit too much time to get to the point. The other thing I didn't like about this series was it felt a bit too cheesy. A little cheese here and there is good, especially for a feel-good series like this, but it felt a bit too cheesy at a couple of points in it. Especially for me, the fight between RMD's character Olumide and his best friend, the actor who unfortunately passed away last year. I think a bit more thought could have gone into their fight in the living room. Qui devrait le voir? I think the people that will enjoy Postcards are patient people because you definitely need a bit of patience to see Postcards from beginning to the end, right? Also, if you enjoy Bollywood or you like Indian culture and heritage, then I think you'll enjoy Postcards, especially if you also like Nollywood movies and series. This project or this series does a good job of merging the two. Also, if you like somewhat cheesy content or cheesy series or movies, I think you like this as well. In conclusion, this wasn't a bad watch, I have to be honest. The production design, once again, really good. I kept on appreciating the lighting, the dramatic lighting, RMD's performance, Rahama Sadau being portrayed differently or playing a different kind of role. There are just so many things for me to latch on to as I watched this, so it really wasn't a bad production or a bad watch. There are people who, and I'm sure there are many of them online, who will not agree with what I just said. I'm sure there are people who did not enjoy it or who have contrary opinions. But here's the thing, I think there are more people who like Postcards than the people who won't like Postcards. Time to rate Postcards. I give Postcards a rating of 2.5 jollofs over 5. Guys, if you enjoyed this review of Postcards, I really hope that you did. Please do me a favor and like this video by clicking on the like button just underneath the video, and subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking on the black subscribe button. On this channel, I don't just review Nollywood movies or, Netflix series. I don't just do that stuff. I also talk about other things. To check out a playlist of some of my other series or movies, like, the Eniola series, Rise of the Spectre. Anyway, to check out all that stuff, you can click the card in the corner of the screen. That's what I was getting at. The card in the corner of the screen will take you to all the good stuff. I also have a podcast called the 30-Minute Podcast. I was going to tell you what it's about, but I think you should go and check it out and find out for yourself. The link to that will be in the card in the corner of the screen as well, or the description box below. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.